This podcast is brought to you by Meteorate.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our third podcast of the Seriously Funny Wellbeing Show. I'm your host, Homer Papantonio, and it's an honour again to introduce our illustrious co-host, Dr. Ross Walker. We're going to introduce you in a very multicultural way today, Ross.
Oh, that's good.
The Italians would say, buongiorno dottore, come stai bene? Or in Greek it would be, pospas iatros megalos, isse kala. And they both mean, how are you, doctor? Oh, great one. Are you having a good day?
Well, I particularly like the great one, and I'm having a very busy day, but I've just finished seeing patients, but ready to go
That's
with
good.
this.
You are always busy. So the medical news.
Yeah.
Today, let's kick off with the medical news. What happened?
Well, every week we're going to introduce some of the latest and greatest medical news of the week, and this week was a big study of just under 125,500 people looking at the link between, now wait for this one, melatonin and age-related macular degeneration. Now, that might sound like a big mouthful, but AMD, or age-related macular degeneration, is a very common cause of blindness as people age. And this was done in people over the age of 50, and found that those people who had the highest intake of melatonin and the highest levels of melatonin in their bloodstream had the lowest levels of age-related macular degeneration. And people who were already showing signs of this condition who took melatonin, then the deterioration of their AMD slowed down. Now, melatonin, as most of us know, is something people take to help them sleep. And strangely, Homer, it is not a sedative. All it does is reset your biologic clock. So I use it, say, for example, as part of my jet lag cure, which is probably a talk for another time. But you can, over the age of 50, you can get it over the counter. It's not that expensive. And if you do have a history of macular degeneration in the family, or you're starting to show some early signs, it's a very harmless thing to take. It's typically in slow release form, 2 milligrams over the counter. I think it's showing some pretty promising stuff. Interesting.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Because melatonin, even when I was flying many years ago, a lot of flight attendants were taking it to try and get to sleep at their destination. And it's also found in red wine, isn't it? Melatonin.
Not that I'm aware of. No, I think you're talking about resveratrol.
No, I think Italian researchers have found that melatonin is in red wine.
No,
I'll have a little bet on that one.
Not disputing it. I haven't seen that, though.
Okay, and also molecular degeneration has always been linked. It hasn't also been linked to cannabis use being a benefit in that it relaxes the area behind the eye.
I haven't seen that with AMD, macular degeneration. That there are some, and that's again the topic for other podcasts. The benefits of medical cannabis versus the detriments of smoking the damn stuff, because they're two separate things and should be considered separately. So I haven't seen the evidence for macular degeneration, but I do know medical cannabis has been tried in a variety of different conditions, some with some benefits, others with minimal benefits.
Right. Any more medical news there, Ross?
No. We'll move on to the future of medicine. And so my future of medicine for this week, and this is interesting, is that one of the big things that we will be talking about throughout this podcast is the vital importance of having a healthy microbiome. So the microbiome, the colony of bacteria living in your gut. And here's the point. We're about 40 trillion, maybe 30 to 40 trillion human cells, but somewhere between 40 to 100 trillion bacterial cells, most of those bacteria living in the large bowel, most of them, not all of them. And we now know there's a strong link between having disease in your microbiome and many common diseases. But the problem is a lot of people now are going off and having their stool samples done to see what's going on in their microbiome. And there's a big issue with doing that because it's just a small snapshot. I make the point if you go into a native forest and just into one section of the native forest, and you say, well, this is what the whole of the native forest looks like, you're missing a whole lot of different animals and flora and fauna. You might just be getting a small sample of that one forest. And that's what a stool specimen is. So this new technique, you swallow this capsule that has these particular little vents. It's like swallowing a vitamin pill, but they're these little vents throughout the capsule, and it takes in the microbiome, samples it all throughout your colon, and then you pass it out and collect it and get it tested. But you're getting a much better overall sample of the microbiome, so you can really see what's happening in each individual's gut. Because we're going to be getting to the point in the future, not too far off, where we'll be sampling people's stools by doing this sort of stuff rather than just taking one sample, and be able to say, okay, you've got this healthy group of bacteria here, but maybe this one's not so good, and adjusting using different things like probiotics or something that I've developed, a tribiotic, which can help all of this stuff. So I thought that was
It's
really
almost like inserting a camera down there to find out. Remember, there was talk with the future of medicine that there'll be a day where we can insert a camera down the arteries.
No, it's the arteries, yes, but we're actually doing that. There is a thing called a pill camera that many people swallow who have gastrointestinal bleeding. And you see, when you have a gastroscopy, they put the tube down the throat. You can only get to a little bit of the small bowel, the duodenum, and maybe the top of what we call the jejunum, but you can't go any further. And there's about 6 meters of small bowel which you can't look at, and then with a colonoscopy, you go up through the anus and have a large bowel where you can't see much of the small bowel from there either. So this pill camera, which is already available and is used by many gastroenterologists, you swallow it and passes through it. It takes little pictures all the way through the small bowel as well. So that's being done. So let's move on from future.
Body of evidence.
Body of evidence. Yep. So the body of evidence this week is a study out showing that Generation X's, and they're people who were born between 1965 to 1980, so you and I just miss out, and Generation X's are the ones who came after the baby boomers. And what this study found, it's a bit disturbing, is that there are higher cancer rates in the Generation X's in their age group compared with when we were the same age group. So the cancer rates are rising in Generation X compared with what they were for baby boomers at the same time. And there's a few thoughts about this. Interestingly, the lung cancer rates are dropping in men and women, and that's because people aren't smoking as much. But all the other common cancers are going up, and a lot of those common cancers are the obesity-related cancers. Things like breast cancer, colorectal cancer, bowel cancer, prostate cancer, ovarian cancers, all of these things, pancreatic cancer, they're all rising in the Generation X people. And some of the other things like non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, some of the leukemias are going up in Generation X's. And I think the reason is, firstly, there is a greater rate of obesity in the Generation X's now compared with when we were the same age as them. So it's obesity, it's the stresses of modern living are becoming worse. It's all of the extra synthetic chemicals people have been exposed to, the pollution that's increasing in major cities, although some of the pollution's better, some of it's worse. And so there's so many factors that are going on here, but I still think the key, which is what we're talking about today in our main section, is all about lifestyle, how you look after yourself. We spoke about, on last week's segment, we spoke about the blue zones where they have this enormous longevity. Well, we have to get to be able to have blue zones in our own life in the modern world, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the segment. So that's
it is interesting how we've got away from what our ancestors did. With, as an ex-flight attendant, it's quite interesting the number of people that I know that have flown, especially women that have had breast cancer and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and all that. A disproportionately high number have had immune-type diseases. And you wonder whether it's that continual exposure to being at 35,000 feet.
The cosmic radiation. Let me say there's a much higher rate of melanoma in pilots because the glare is coming through
Yes.
the windscreen, and there's a much higher rate of breast cancer in female flight attendants because of the cosmic radiation. So I think, look, as much as I love flying, I think it's not particularly good for your health. And then many people now are just spending so much time on planes, strangely pilots and flight attendants, and so those people are getting much higher rates of all of these modern diseases as well. So there's a lot of issues.
The positive,
yeah,
the positive health benefits are like sitting at the pointy end, sipping on a really good red wine in first class. I think lowers your health risk, don't you think?
Oh, I tell my wife all the time. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But let's move on. Let's move on to the myth.
Medical myths.
Now, the myth for this week. Now, this is a lot of men listening to this are going to enjoy this one. The myth is that Viagra and its mates like Cialis are bad for the heart. So I spoke on my radio show, shameless plug there, Healthy Living, 7 to 9 every Sunday night on the 9 Network.
Great show.
Fantastic show. But I spoke a year ago about a study of 72,000 men followed for 14 years over the age of 50. Those who were the highest end users of Viagra and Cialis had, wait for this, a 55% reduction in cardiac events, a 50% reduction in all-cause death, and now this study out of Oxford University in England suggesting people who use Viagra, less dementia. And another study that was done on laboratory animals, less bowel cancer. So we can dismiss that myth that Viagra is bad for you. I encourage all my male patients over the age of 50 to use Viagra as much as they like, and the other benefit is you don't fall out of bed as much.
Okay. So obviously there's a sexual side to that, in that the frequency of, did that help too? The frequency of having intercourse?
Can I say, and this is, I'm sure there's no children listening to this, but every time a male empties his prostate, there is the prostate swelling is reduced. So one of the best treatments of a swollen prostate is to regularly empty the prostate with sexual activity, and there's less prostate cancer with the more sexual activity. Every time a woman has an orgasm, they flush all the crap out of the pelvis, less genitourinary cancers. It's very good for your relationship, and best drug on the planet, thing called happiness. It keeps people happy. So I encourage sexual activity. I say to all my patients, it's very important to do so. And I'll tell you a story, Homer, that there was this husband and wife saying goodbye to each other out the front of their house. I looked across the road, and the couple across the road were giving each other a passionate kiss. And then the man walked away, and the wife nudges the husband and says, "Why don't you do that?" And he says, "I've never met the woman."
Look, I agree with you, Ross. I reckon if you handle a stiff problem for long enough, you're bound to find a solution.
Yep,
honestly.
No doubt about
it. But interestingly about prostate cancer, they're saying now that even masturbation assists that, but you need to masturbate 50 times a month.
What?
That's a lot of, not 50 times, every few months. It's a ridiculous amount of, I don't know whether those studies are empirical.
I don't go well. I've not heard that one, and I will say to you, Homer, I'll leave that one alone, so to speak.
Yes, of course. We don't want it to. We don't an X rating with this show, do we?
No, we don't. I could have made a few other jokes on that, but as I said, I'll leave that one well alone. Now, the
thought of the week.
Thought of the week.
Right.
Very straightforward one. I've almost alluded to this. Is that 90% of modern diseases are related in some way to what's going on in your gut microbiome. Just a thought to leave you with. So let's get on to today's topic.
Okay. Today we're talking about the 5 keys to a healthy life. And Ross, this is a subject close to my heart, especially when we talk about a long, healthy life.
Yep.
I've got a grandfather who lived to 102. I've got a grandmother and mother who lived to 94. So there's a really reasonably good chance that I'll have a long life, maybe.
Yep.
Maybe. But as Mark Twain said, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans for the future.
Yep.
And it's true. So what does it mean to be healthy? The Oxford Dictionary definition of health is a state of complete physical, mental and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. And there's a feeling of good, vibrant health. It's vitality, it's feeling good. It helps you to become fully engaged in life. And as Ross, you know that I'm very big on that, the principles of being fully engaged, and it's about being physically energized, emotionally connected, mentally focused and spiritually aligned. So in that context, what are the 5 keys to a healthy life?
Well, before I go into that, I just want to make a point to everyone listening to this today. I practice medicine using what I call the 80-10-10 rule. 80% of the 5 keys. So the 5 keys to a healthy life are 4 times more powerful anything a doctor can suggest to you. So 80% is the 5 keys. We'll get onto that very soon. 10% pharmaceutical drugs and medical procedures if you need them. And the other 10% is the use of evidence-based supplements. And we'll get onto those things in another podcast. So let's focus on what I believe to be the most important aspect of anyone's medical care, anyone's life, is how they look after themselves. So let's go through the 5 keys from the least important to the most important. So number 1, you cannot be healthy and have any addictions. So anyone who smokes, drinks too much alcohol, snorts cocaine, uses marijuana is unhealthy. And so to me, number 1 is to quit all addictions.
Can I just ask you a question on that?
Yep.
There are negative and positive addictions. Would you agree in life?
I'm talking about, but I agree, but I'm talking about the addiction to a substance.
But if we've established that someone's got an addictive personality,
Yeah.
and they give up smoking to take up running or cycling or rowing, and they're addicted to that, is that a good thing?
Oh, that's a very good thing, because I have a thing called the 5-point power plan, which is, again, a topic for another podcast. But part of that is to replace a bad habit with a good habit, because nature abhors a vacuum. So if you are somebody who does have an addictive personality, and let's talk about cigarettes for a second, and I think we should spend another podcast talking about how to give up smoking, what you should be doing. But if you are one of the 1 in 5 people who have very strong receptors in your brain for nicotine addiction, once you've had a cigarette, you are hooked. So the only way you can get off that is firstly making the decision to get off it, but also replacing that bad habit with a better habit. And so I'm not saying all habits are bad. Many habits are good. You've mentioned probably one of the best habits anyone can have, exercise. But you can say, I'm addicted to exercise. Well, I'm talking about being addicted to a physical substance, not to a physical activity. But if you're addicted to cigarettes, alcohol, illegal drugs, even coffee, you are ill. Now,
because there's an old adage that says you can't be intelligent and smoke at the same time. If you look at what a cigarette is, it's got over, I think, 1,000 known carcinogenics. So they light the cigarette, they suck it in, they inhale it, let it do the damage, and then exhale it. And sometimes you don't know what orifice it's going to come out of. And then they do that continually for, 8-9 cigarettes a day, every hour or so they're ingesting.
A day, yeah. Well, for example,
and it's costing them a packet, pardon the pun.
Yeah. Oh, it's costing thousands every year.
Yeah.
But look, you said you can't be intelligent and smoke. Well, no, I don't agree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, Barack Obama was addicted to, well, probably still is addicted to cigarettes, and he'd have a few cigarettes every day. Barack Obama is an incredibly intelligent man, and I don't think Donald Trump smokes. So anyhow, that aside, what I'm saying is that I when I was training to be a physician, before I became you do physician's training, then you go to a subspecialty, in my case, of course, cardiology, but I did 6 months of respiratory medicine. The professor of respiratory medicine, who'd had bypass surgery twice, would tell people all day, every day, they were idiots for smoking, and at lunchtime he'd duck out the back and have a cigarette because he was addicted to nicotine. And can I say to you that nicotine is the least dangerous part of a cigarette, but it's the thing that addicts you to the cigarette. And there are, you mentioned thousands. Yeah, there are thousands of microdoses of different chemicals, but there are 50 known poisons, serious poisons in every cigarette. And look, a very simple cancer prevention technique, use the organ for what it was designed for. We mentioned the prostate before, empty your prostate regularly. But the best example there is you've got a couple of things in your lungs, a couple of things in your chest called your lungs that were strangely designed for a thing called breathing, not to put a white stick in your mouth and suck the smoke in.
But to demonstrate how addictive cigarettes are, we'll just close on this, but you've seen that documentary of that, I think he's a doctor going through a cancer ward. He's interviewing all these people that unfortunately are dying from smoke-related illnesses, and one of them's had a tracheotomy or a laryngectomy with his whole... And he's actually sticking the cigarette in the tracheotomy and smoking it.
Yeah.
And he's asked why, and they love it. And I can understand the magnitude of the addiction that they've got. That they just can't. Yeah.
Unless you have those receptors in your brain for nicotine addiction, you just don't understand it. But anyone who's listening to this who has smoked before and was addicted to nicotine will be nodding their heads and say, I know what you're saying. The problem is it's so bad for you to smoke. But we'll talk about that another time.
Yep.
Number one. Number two is good quality sleep. So 7 to 8 hours of good quality sleep per night is as good for you as not smoking. And each one of these keys we'll spend a full session on, but I just want to go through the 5 keys of being healthy. But let me say with smoking, it's about 2 things. It's about duration and it's about regularity. So we know the sweet spot with sleeping is about 7 to 8 hours every night, but there are certain people who only need 4 hours. Not many, but some people just get on with 4 hours of sleep and it doesn't affect their health at all. Winston Churchill, one of them. Winston Churchill smoked, drank, was overweight, depressed, slept 4 hours a night, lived till he was 91. So it's not all about everybody has to do the same thing. But for 95% of us, we need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. But it's also sleep regularity, not just duration.
Yeah.
So there's no point one night going to bed at 11 o'clock, the next night going to bed at 9 o'clock, the next night going to bed at 1 o'clock. You've got to sleep within about an hour's window. Go to sleep with about an hour's window of each night and wake up within about an hour's window. And look, 70% of people are larks, go to bed early, wake up early. 30% are night owls, go to bed late, wake up late. So 7 to 8 hours, number 2 of sleep. Number 3 is nutrition. Now, we need to spend not just one session, but many sessions about this. But there are so many bad diets out there, so many books on nutrition and whatever, but it's so straightforward. It's called Eat Less Food, Eat More Natural Food. That's all you need to know about nutrition. We'll go into the benefits of the only diet that has a strong evidence base, which is the Mediterranean diet. We'll do that at another time, but eat less food, eat more natural food. Okay, number 4, one of your favourite subjects, Homer, is 3 to 5 hours every week of moderate exertion, which I think should be 2/3 cardio and 1/3 resistance training. And people who do that on a regular basis have a 30% reduction in heart disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, diabetes, 50% reduction in depression and osteoporosis. It drops your blood pressure and you sleep better. There is no pharmaceutical preparation known to man that is as strong for you as a regular exercise habit. And tragically, Homer, only 25% of the population do that level of exercise and 27% do no exercise whatsoever. And I've got to say, I was at the gym the other day and Elton John brought his pet rabbit to the gym. It's a little bit bunny. Sorry.
And look, you and I disagree on the magnitude of exercise. And what I'd like to convey to our viewers is that there's a psychology of exercise. There's an emotional, mental, and a spiritual benefit to exercise that is as important, I think, as the physical side. And that's something we will discuss further on. But
Sure.
it's interesting with exercise how important also weight training is, especially for people over 50, because it's the only activity that actually maintains muscle mass and muscle strength. You can row, run, swim as much as you like. It may do a little bit of the muscle mass stuff, but it's really targeted resistance training and weight training that fits the bill there.
If you're upper body, but your lower body, cycling does enormous things for the. I mean, my legs are like tree stumps because I do half an hour on my exercise bike every day. And you're an extreme cyclist. You're almost Tour de France stuff. So,
but
that's exercise.
Sarcopenia. A little bit about that? That's what I was referring to.
Right. Sarcopenia is loss of muscle mass. And you see, a lot of people have heard of osteoporosis. And this is one of the problems. So for everyone listening, our bodies were designed to work well for 30, 40 years, wandering around a jungle with a spear. So 30 is the peak of your life, and it's all downhill from that. But here's the thing. Osteoporosis starts at age 30, but so does sarcopenia, which is loss of muscle mass. And you lose a significant proportion of muscle mass every decade, which is why over the age of 65, 45% are either frail or pre-frail. So, and you can look at someone and see whether they're frail. These are people that are tired all the time. They can't get out of a chair well. They can't walk up a flight of stairs without puffing. They lose weight inappropriately, and so there's all of these things that go with being frail. And again, another talk for another time. But one of the ways you stop frailty, an interesting study done that showed 70% of loss of independence in older people is due to loss of muscle strength and inability to exercise. 30% loss of the little grey cells. So exercise is a vital, vital, vital part of everyone's life. And as I said, tragically, only 25% of people do the Walker prescribed dose, 3 to 5 hours per week.
Let me say something on that with exercise. As was demonstrated with all the people that live in the blue zones, or most of them, they find their play. They garden, they dance, they go on walks. That's their form. It's not maybe a legitimate or conventional form of exercise, but and it also looks at the other aspects of exercise, as the emotional and the almost the spiritual benefits of it. And that's really intriguing with the blue zones. A lot of them, there's no gyms on that Greek island, is there?
No, they don't do formal exercise. They're just moving all day. So that's number 4, and we need to spend much more time on each one of these. So let's move on now to the 5th one, which is, in my view, and the view of many people, the most important drug on the planet, which is a thing called happiness. And in fact, there's a little-known university in America called Harvard, one of the great learning institutions.
I've heard of it.
And Harvard University have been doing for the last 80 years the GRAD study. And the GRAD study showed that the one key to health and happiness that stands above everything else is not your damn cholesterol level or your blood pressure or your calcium score. It's having someone else in your life who loves and cares for you, who you love and care for. It's so much more important than anything else. So what we're saying here is having solid relationships with other human beings, especially your primary partner, is the most selfish thing you can do for your health. Now, it's all not, look, there are some people who prefer their own company and they might be living alone, but they prefer that over living with other people. I'm not talking about them, that they can enjoy their lives without having that relationship. But what I'm saying is, for most of us, having a solid relationship with another human being and having a strong sense of family, a strong sense of community, those things are so much more important than worrying about whether your blood pressure is sitting at 120 or 130 or whatever. And so,
Ross, it goes beyond a primary partner. I know you mentioned the extended,
of course,
and everything, because I mean we've got divorce rates I think close to 65% at the moment.
yeah.
So,
and can I say, the commonest cause of divorce is marriage.
no, a lot of people just pick maybe the wrong person. Maybe there should be some sort of selection course, or I don't know, call it marriage counselling course, to select the right partner. Because a lot of people are incompatible.
They grow apart as they get older. They get married. They're very intense when they start off, and then they have children. And they grow apart because they don't really maintain that primary relationship. They just become mum and dad, and then the children leave. They go, "What are we doing now? It's all gone." So it's important.
Do you understand those couples that have said they've been together for 45 years and haven't had one argument? My wife and I argue every half hour, but the most important thing is you forgive and get on with things. Don't hold grudges, because you know how to annoy that person better than anyone else.
No,
if you
of
really
course.
Want to.
I think that people who say they've never had an argument, well, one member of that relationship's unnecessary because they're accommodating too much the person that they continually argue with. So, So, and look, I want to just say that I found this book called How to Solve 50% of Your Problems, so I bought two. So look, to me, and this is, again, something we should spend a lot more time talking about on another occasion, but I believe happiness is divided into internal happiness and external happiness, and part of external happiness is the relationships you have with people. So it's a huge topic, but now let me finish off by making the point here that if you practice the 5 keys of being healthy all through your life, and tragically, Homer, less than 10% of people do, you reduce your risk for cardiovascular disease by 83%. If you take a pill to lower your cholesterol, you get about a 20% reduction in cardiovascular disease. But people just don't want to put in the hard yards. It takes an effort and commitment. A guy called Napoleon Hill wrote a book around 100 years ago called Think and Grow Rich. And he wasn't talking about money per se. The 2 great success principles of life are discipline and perseverance. And I think it's so important that no matter what you do, you show discipline in it and you keep doing it, because that, if it's good for you, you keep doing it. So this Morgan trial out of Holland, 83% reduction in cardiovascular disease. Another trial called the Million Veterans trial out of the US, which studied, strangely, 750,000 people. I don't know how they call it the Million Veterans trial, but showed that if you started practicing the 5 keys of being healthy from age 40, you added 24 extra years to your life. So if your life expectancy is 80, you could even live another 24 years on top of that. That hasn't been proven yet. But what they're saying is that if you compare people who practice the 5 keys to people who don't practice the 5 keys, there's about a 24-year difference. So to me, the evidence is overwhelming, and I just find it really disappointing that less than 10% of people follow those 5 keys of being healthy.
But isn't it amazing and significant how big lifestyle is? That you said it was 80% lifestyle, 10% pharmaceutical, and the other 10% evidence-based supplements.
Yep.
But isn't it amazing that the potency of lifestyle to even override those other 2 areas?
We spoke about the blue zones last week. I've never heard of Lipitor or gyms or any of that sort of nonsense.
Yeah.
They just practice a simple lifestyle. They practice the 5 keys without being lectured about it. That's just how they live. And that's the point, that we're only designed to, physiologically, to live 30, 40 years wandering around a jungle with a spear. But if you want to take it beyond that and still have a good quality of life, don't see modern medicine as your answer. See lifestyle as your answer. So
do you think there's an attitudinal side to health and healing? Do you think that Because there's a school of thought, especially amongst naturopaths, is that the body will always heal itself if it's given the right conditions. And there's it's about optimism and perspective and all those areas, and that's really intriguing. That I find too.
All the above. So let's move on to answering some of the listeners' or viewers' questions.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Walker. My question, this is from Poppy on the Gold Coast. Hi, my question is, we know sunlight gives the best vitamin D during certain hours of the day with no sunblock needed. When our vitamin D levels are down and the doctor suggests taking vitamin D tablets, how do we know if this, I assume, a normal synthetic vitamin D? How the hell does our body try to break down this synthetic vitamin? I think this is not a natural process and puts stress on our body and causes other diseases. What do you think?
No, it doesn't. The vitamin D is still made from natural sources, and it's not stressing the body at all. And in fact, when you get sunlight, or when you swallow vitamin D3, which is the standard vitamin D capsule, it's got to go. It is absorbed in through the liver, where it's converted to it. So it's cholecalciferol, goes through the liver, gets converted to what we call 25-hydroxycholecalciferol. Then there's a second checkpoint. It's got to go through the kidneys and be converted to a thing called 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol. That's when it becomes active vitamin D. So there's a lot of, shall we say, checkpoints along the way to make sure the right thing is made. And what is unnecessary just gets taken out in the fat tissues and broken down, because vitamin D is one of the fat-soluble vitamins. So the studies are shown beyond a doubt. I'll give you an example. 25,000 people followed for 5 years. Those who took 2 vitamin D capsules, they're not tablets, 2 vitamin D capsules, 1,000 units of each, so 2,000 units a day for 5 years, had a 25% reduction in autoimmune disease. That's just one example. Those people who during COVID maintained their vitamin D levels at about 100 had much lower rates of COVID complications, and COVID death.
Yeah.
And look, in Australia is the skin cancer capital of the world. You don't want too much sun, but you want to keep your vitamin D levels around 100. I think the best way to do that is to get some sun exposure during the non-burning times, before 10, after 3, and take a couple of vitamin D capsules every day. It's not going to hurt you.
But it's interesting how Greeks and Italians living in Melbourne, apparently they've a fair few of them are vitamin D deprived.
But the reason is people like you, Homer, unlike the plethoric people like me with a more Caucasian skin, you have a much better melanin cover, so you don't absorb as much vitamin D. So many of the black races have very low vitamin Ds because the sunlight's just not getting through the skin.
Okay, we've got one more question from Natalie, also from the Gold Coast. I'm 63, I'm postmenopausal. Can you tell me, is the high cortisol levels affecting my heart health? I have gained 8 kilos. I do exercise. Is it true or false that high cortisol levels is due to stress? Is there a way to reduce cortisol naturally with diet and vitamins?
Yep. Yeah,
I have never taken HRT.
It's a brilliant question, and the answer is yes. You've got a couple of things sitting above your kidneys called the adrenal glands. And many years ago, I wrote a book called The Life Factor, which is about how to manage stress. And there was the late, great Stan Zemanek, who was a disc jockey in Sydney. Yeah. I went on his show for 45 minutes because he didn't believe in stress. Stan was a stress donor. He didn't believe in stress. So, and he argued very badly why Stan was a wonderful, wonderful human being, tragically died from a brain tumour. But I argued in the book very clearly that the adrenal glands are purely designed to cope with stress. So if there's no such thing as stress, why do we have two natural things sitting there coping with stress? So the outer bit of the adrenal glands make cortisone and related substances. The inner bits of the adrenal glands make adrenaline. So when you get an acute shock, the adrenaline squeezes. That's why you get the butterflies in your stomach, because the adrenaline's coming out of the adrenal glands and give you that butterfly feeling, whereas the cortisone's more secreted by chronic stresses. So if you're chronically under stress, you're releasing more cortisone into your system. It makes it much harder for people to lose weight when they're stressed, because they have, not only are they probably eating more for comfort eating, but they have higher levels of cortisone, and so therefore laying down more fat from the higher levels of cortisone, putting up. And here's now how it affects your cardiovascular system. It's driving up your blood pressure, the high cortisone levels, and cortisone weakens the lining of blood vessels. So that combined with some adrenaline from some acute stress, when you've got weaker blood vessels and higher blood pressure, means it's very easy to crack open a plaque and form a clot in your artery. So yes, there's no doubt that cortisone is related to stress and can weaken your cardiovascular system.
Great. That's great. So we've covered the emails. I think we're almost ready to sign off. If anyone wants to get more information on our podcast, just go to seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com. That's seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com. The best email for us is hello@seriouslyfunnywellbeing.com. So go on the website, have a peruse. You can have a look at all the podcasts, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Bye.
Bye.